Saudi Arabia says it's rooting out terrorists in the village of Awamiya. But is the military operation an assault on the country's Shia minority? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Saudi action in Awamiya. Well, back in 2011, the Saudi village of Awamiya was the site of an anti-government rebellion during the Arab Spring, which is why government critics believe it's now the target of a military operation. The aim, well, it depends on whom you ask. The government says Shia militants there have been attacking police for years. But activists say the Sunni-led government has a different motive: to evict the area's Shia Muslims, destroy their homes, and build high-rises in their place. Vanessa Keneally reports.
Here's what's left of the historic area of Awamiya in the Saudi Arabian province of Qatif. It's a place around 30,000 people call home, but the Saudi government calls a hideout for terrorists. Over the past few months, residents, who are predominantly Shia, have either been asked to leave or forcibly removed. They're accused of taking up arms to stop the area from being demolished. The people who run the kingdom say it's time for modern skyscrapers and up-to-date infrastructure.
Of course, we didn't get approval from everyone, but most Qatif and Awamiya residents wanted to see their neighborhoods developed and attracting visitors from among the residents and beyond.
But critics say for a plan that's been 6 years in the making, it's been poorly executed. In 2011, Awamiya was the scene of protests in Saudi Arabia during the Arab Spring. They were led by prominent Shia cleric Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr, who was executed in January 2016, convicted of inciting sectarian strife. His death, along with 46 others, led to protests around the world, including in Iran, where demonstrators set fire to the Saudi Arabian embassy, further deepening the Sunni-Shia divide between the two countries. Then in June, Iran's Revolutionary Guard blamed Riyadh after Daesh attacked a parliament building and shrine in Tehran, killing 18 people and inflaming relations even further.
It's Iran that is interfering in the affairs of our countries, and it is Iran that is lighting the fires of sectarianism.
Some believe the fight for Awamiya is less about religion and more about the large amount of oil the Shia community is sitting on in the eastern province. But no matter what the driving force is behind Riyadh's decision, the city has been torn apart and its people displaced. Vanessa Keneally, the Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss this further is Galip Dalai. He is the research director of Al-Shaq Forum, a think tank focusing on international affairs. In Washington, we have Ali Al-Ahmed. He is the director of the Institute for Gulf Affairs. And also from Washington, Andrew Bowen. He is an analyst focused on Gulf countries for the American Enterprise Institute. Thanks all so much for joining us. Ali, let me begin with you in Washington. Why is Saudi doing what it's doing in Awamiya? Is it a necessary security operation there, or is something else at play?
It is something else. It's part of the Saudi war on the people of the country. And now part of that war is targeting the Shia. Over the life of Saudi Arabia, the Saudi monarchy have waged a war on the cultural heritage of the non-Saudis in the mindset, because the Saudis view the Shia are non-Saudis and they're not part of their history. The history of the Shia and their cities precedes that of Saudi Arabia. And the Saudis have waged a war on those cultural landmarks, not only for the Shia, but also for the Turks, for example, where they destroyed everything that the Turkish rule in Arabian Peninsula have built in terms of forts, bridges, you name it. They want to raise the other culture, the other history, and that's part of that. And for this particular case, they are trying to destroy and punish the center of dissent and protests against them, to make an example for the rest of the population.
Andrew, is that true? Is this a targeted assault on a Saudi minority group?
Like, I think certainly there are deep grievances within the Shia community in Saudi Arabia in terms of their relation with Riyadh and how the state engages with them. On the other hand, though, we can also say that there's been a deep level of involvement by Iran and other external actors who would like to sow instability in the eastern province. So on the one hand, you have legitimate grievances. On the other hand, you don't have more grievances. You also have a sense of wanting to stir insurrection and other things, which makes then this a much more complicated scenario.
Okay, let me bring it back to the studio. Ghalib, is a Saudi hand at play here?
Well, the trouble with the recent events as well, too, the Saudi Arabia, they have to make distinction between who he defines as citizen, who defines as Arab Shias, and who he defines as the Iranian. The trouble that I see, Saudi Arabia doesn't make distinction between the Iran as a nation state, Arab Shia region-wide as a the integral component of the region, and the Shia population of Saudi Arabia as its citizen. So that the mindset is problematic. In fact, it is possible that Iran is very much involved in some of the activities in the Qatif region of the Saudi Arabia, and perhaps it is doing, and perhaps also like Saudi Arabia will try to like disturb Iran on another occasions, like from Yemen to Iran. I mean, Iran has been accusing Saudi Arabia of funding some of the Kurdish militias in activities against the Iranian regime as well too. But the question is, how should we define the people that are in Awamiya, the people that are in Masawara district, the people in the Qatif region? They are the Saudi citizen. But the discourse that is coming from out of it is as if like, the people that are occupying these lands are the proxies of Iran rather than the citizen of Saudi Arabia. So if Saudi Arabia goes down this road, if it doesn't make distinction between its citizens and Iran, the Arab Shias and Iran, I think it will exactly strengthen what it wants to weaken, which is the Iran. If you try to if you portray your citizen as Iranian proxies, after a while the citizen will become one tool of the Iranian regime vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia. So in this regard, I think like Saudi Arabia has to start by making distinction between its citizens, Arab Shias, and Iran as a nation state in the region.
Okay, Ali, I'll let you respond because I could see you agree and disagree with several things you heard. Go ahead.
Look, just to suggest that people in a region, a minority or a majority, they have loyalty outside their border is xenophobic and ignorant. To say that all American Jews are Israeli proxies, that's ridiculous. That's, repugnant. The Shia Arabs precede Iran's to convert to Shiism. And this is the first Shia community, in fact, before Iraq. And the history of dissent goes back centuries, not only decades in that region. And if Iran hand was in Awamiya, I trust you, I tell you, I know my country very well, we would see fighting in Riyadh. There was no support. Iranian media, you can notice over the past 10 days, over the past 2 weeks, were silent on anything that's happened in Awamiya. I know because I appear on Iranian TV. I never received a call for more than a month regarding this issue. So to say that without evidence, this really is xenophobic and repugnant. And the fact is, the Saudi treatment of Shia precedes Iranian revolution. And their extremism and view is not limited to the Shia. It's even the only, because this is a Turkish TV, the only Muslim group that labeled Turkey as religion, Turkey as a state, as a heretic, is the Saudi government religious authority. And that's what they do. If they don't like you, you are an Iranian agent, you are an Israeli agent, you are a Jew, you are whatever. So this is really the reality, is you have a government that is deeply sectarian, that does not allow the Shia of Qatif, for example, or any Shia to be a mayor. There is not a single Shia mayor, even in Qatif, or a single Shia diplomat, or in the Saudi Washington embassy, for example, never had one Shia, one. So this is really a part of a policy that is since the start of the Saudi state that's view the Shia as the enemy.
Then, Andrew, why are you relatively certain that Iran's hand is at play in Qatif, in Saudi Arabia, trying to undermine the Saudi government?
Look, on the one hand, certainly you could say that there are deep, legitimate grievances, which Ali has noted, and how the role of being a Shia in Saudi Arabia is not the same as being a Sunni. And that's been deep grievances. On the other hand, though, you look at why does one take to arms? Why does one lead to kind of a series of an internal insurrection? And you look at kind of a lot of evidence also points to the fact that Iran has taken advantage of these grievances, that Iran has capitalized on them. You look at in Bahrain with the arms shipments to even in the eastern province. It's not just to say that this is some like xenophobic categorization. It's the fact is that these grievances have been capitalized by Iran, and which is unfortunate. It's not to diminish the fact that Saudi Arabia needs to take more steps to to make a more inclusive governance in the eastern province. But to say that this is completely not with no foreign involvement, I think is slightly naive.
Okay.
But more
there
broadly,
is no foreign involvement. There is no foreign involvement. If the Iranians take advantage, it's their. But no one can stop them. You don't blame the people for Iranians' action, because there is no shipments. These people had Kalashnikovs, which are available in Saudi Arabia. There was no other weapons that these young kids fought back after their children were killed, after many citizens were killed and shot by the death squads and by the American-trained forces. People were shot point blank in the street, and people have to fight, just like your forefathers in Boston fought back the English. We are facing the same thing. These are people who want freedom from an absolute monarchy, just like the forefathers of this country.
Andrew, if you want to respond quickly,
go ahead. I think that
there's
a difference between that, though.
Go ahead.
I think that a more constructive approach would be to build a more sustainable, there's a question of, do you take arms up against the state and want a revolution, or do you want to work within the state itself? And I think that if the narrative is that we are doing a revolution, that's not certainly going to build much trust with Riyadh.
Look, Andrew,
and then what do you see as the solution? It has not worked
for decades, since the time of my grandfather, okay? Since the time of my grandfather, who tried to work with the Saudi state. It didn't work. Instead of giving these people what they need, they were crushed more and more. The Saudis don't understand that. So, that's just like American forefathers. They tried to work with the English, and that's what happened. It came to arms, and that's the reality is going to happen in Saudi Arabia, not only in the Shia area, because the Saudi regime does not want to give power to the people,
then Ali,
and they are the most absolute government.
Do you support taking up arms?
Well, it's not about supporting. That's the reality. This is how history goes. In every place where the government takes everything from you, the only result, when they shoot your children in front of you, and when they destroy your history in front of you, then what's other option?
Okay.
Like I said, in every country, if you look at the French Revolution, the American Revolution, other revolutions, that's exactly what happened.
Okay, Ali, let me give Galip a chance to respond.
Well, I think one of the trouble that we see, we have seen all these words of what you can do or what you cannot do against a legitimate state. The trouble that in the Middle East is state has been reduced to regime reduced to certain elites or parties, and this reduced to certain groups or personality. And when you are against certain groups or policies, all of a sudden you turn onto an enemy of the state. This is exactly what we see in Saudi Arabia. Criticizing or being against certain policies of Saudi Arabia immediately reduce you to just a component of an identity rather than a citizen, and that turns you into an enemy number one in Saudi Arabia. Well, whether you support or an armed response to a government or not, the question is that, well, it's not something you can easily approve it. just, in an armed manner to respond to what is happening. But saying this, on the other hand, but the result is very expectable. The result is something like, it's not surprising. This is the defining feature of the Middle East. When there is no public sphere, when there is no political sphere for the grievances to be channeled through the proper mechanism, this is what you had. Does the Shia community in Saudi Arabia, do they have proper channels to convey their grievances to the Saudi regime and get a result on it? No, they don't have the grievances. And when you don't have, it is obvious what will be the alternative. The alternative is whether it's going to be the armed response or whether it's going to be an underground organization. It is something that, it's not something that is palatable, but it is something that we have had all across the region, and that's very much dependent on whether the regional states will have proper mechanisms
and another
for
issue at play here is proving their grievances. I mean, one of the complaints that Ali had was that he feels that the Shia cultural history is actually physically being erased, and many Shias have said that in Saudi.
Well, the UN has said this as well too.
Right, but when you look at Saudi, I mean, Saudi has been accused of erasing cultural heritage in Mecca itself because in the name of development, they've put hotels up over hundreds-year-old sites in Mecca. So Ali,
in Yemen.
Huh?
In Yemen.
In Yemen as well.
I think
go ahead, Andrew. You'd been waiting to get in as well.
One point though is I think that if we only just encourage a cycle of violence in the Eastern Province, we will never have a sustainable society where Shias feel part of their state. I think that what would be more productive is to actually take advantage of this moment where Prince Mohammed bin Salman is starting a new dialogue with society. And as much as I know that some have doubts about it, I think that there's a space now for dialogue, because the cycle of violence just creates is not really any peace or security or no real actual future. And I think that this idea that taking up arms is the only option seems non-productive.
And which dialogue are you referring
it also
to?
just does not.
Which dialogue are you referring to?
Dialogue in general. I think this idea that the only option one has is to take arms and kill innocent policemen is not a way if you want to have a sustainable future in that part of the country. I think that
there is a
just
distinction.
I think we should be more about children who've been shot by.
On the one hand, there is a distinction.
Look, the Saudi forces is sectarian force who came to.
Hold on, Ali. Let Galip just say his piece, and then I'll turn to you.
Andrew, I think there is a distinction. On the one hand, no one here is encouraging people to take arms and kill the policeman. This is something that we all agree on. But saying this, we should not also, disregard the fact on the ground and disregard the experience on the ground from Tunisia, from up until the Palestine, to Egypt, to Iraq, to Syria, to Lebanon. So the experience of the region is there. When there is no process or the mechanism through which the society can channel their grievances to the power holder and get a result for it, after a while, unfortunately, the arm has become a mechanism of response everywhere in the world. I mean, this has been the case in Latin America. This has been the case in Balkans. This has been the case in the Middle East. So this is not surprising. But saying so, that doesn't mean that we condone it. Saying that right now, Mohammed bin Salman is starting a societal reconciliation process is quite. It's quite odd to me, to be honest, because it is the same person that is the mastermind of the war in Yemen, and for him, war in Yemen has a very strong sectarian identity dimension in which the UN described the Yemen as one of the greatest catastrophes that we are experiencing in the recent decades. And you cannot deny the sectarian dimension, the sectarian motivation that Mohammed bin Salman has when he's unleashed the war in Yemen. And you cannot also detach what is happening in the Qatif region, completely his regional policy, in which sectarianism is a very strong component of his policy.
Andrew, I'll let you just explain briefly then why you have faith in Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to rectify the Shia-Sunni divide in Saudi.
I think we have two issues. Like one this very briefly on Galip's point, that I think on the one hand you could say that there were many mistakes made in Yemen. But I think I would not necessarily make the same linkage between Yemen and the Eastern Province. I think, but my more optimistic note is, yes, I do agree that the current dynamic is unsustainable, and that Mohammed bin Salman has an opportunity to really engage. And I think that it's too early to tell, but I do think that the focus in Saudi is socioeconomic reform. It's building a more inclusive society. I think there's we have seen so far a broader vision. Will this vision lead to something? I'm more optimistic on that. I think that if you are an average Saudi, you're not wanting to be at war with your neighbor, or let alone your own brother.
And Ali, given that you have very little faith...
That's where I'm still taking more optimistic now.
Ali, given that you have very little faith in Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, where do you see this conflict going?
I think this conflict is going to spread, not only in the Shia area. The Saudis didn't only target the Shia, they targeted every local culture in the region, in the south, in the west, in the north. They only want Saudi history. They don't want Islam history or Turkish or Shia or Southerner, and that's why they destroyed all these landmarks.
I will have to let you have the last word, because very unfortunately we're out of time. I'd like to thank all three of you so much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Still to come, we head to the Philippines to find out what's at the heart of a ban on contraceptives. Does it target the poor? And why are locals in holiday hotspots protesting tourism? Welcome back to the Newsmakers. Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte campaigned on the promise of putting contraceptives into the hands of the country's poor. Now in office, he's pushing a program that took 13 years to become law in the overwhelmingly Catholic country. It sets up government-run facilities to give women family planning options, including birth control. But doctors say there's a major hitch in the form of a Supreme Court ruling. From the province of Quezon, here's Randolph Nogel.
Here in one of Quezon City's public medical clinics, new mothers are still waiting. They have access to family planning, something that took more than a decade to achieve. But a crucial component is missing: contraceptives. A temporary restraining order imposed by the Philippine Supreme Court has limited their access. Health officials say the temporary ban disproportionately affects poor women.
A lot of our patients belong to the lesser fortunate classes.
Flor, a mother of 7, has come to weigh her options. Her husband is a street vendor, and she says they cannot afford another child. We visited Flor at her home. She told us that if the temporary ban isn't lifted, she will be forced to pay for contraceptives herself.
Paano po pag kaya ngayon, malapit na nga po ma-expire yung...
My implant will expire in December. What if the ban will not be lifted? Where will I get my next implant? It's expensive.
Iniisip po kung saan po ako pwedeng magpa-implant na.
By some estimates, more than half of all pregnancies in the Philippines are unintended. President Rodrigo Duterte has said family planning is crucial for reducing poverty. He signed an executive order this year so that all poor households have zero unmet need for family planning.
Government is hamstrung in providing services if there are no commodities at hand.
The temporary ban blocks the Food and Drug Administration from relicensing contraceptives. By some estimates, only 2% will be valid by 2020.
It's a testimony to the fact that we have a strong anti-reproductive health lobby, that immediately after the law came into effect, there was a Supreme Court ruling saying, no, don't implement it.
Last year, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines thanked the High Court for showing caution and circumspection on the implementation of the law. Anti-abortion groups say contraceptives are in conflict with an overwhelmingly Catholic society.
The Catholic Church says it wants to promote a culture of life, but critics of the campaign to block universal access to family planning say that less access to women's contraceptives will mean more unwanted pregnancies and more abortions. It's here in the shadows of one of Manila's largest Catholic churches that some pregnant women come to buy illegal abortion medication and bitter herbs said to induce menstruation.
There are 8 million women who depend on family planning services in this country with services from government. They will be left outside looking for methods that they may not want, for example.
So eventually, of course, if there's no solid contraception program, we'll have more kids. We will have more demand for education, for food. There will be food shortages. And then this will go on and on. It will be really, it will be a public health concern.
There's little information about family planning because there are obstacles like the ban. That's why the knowledge is not properly passed on to the youth. I have daughters. 2 of them are teenagers. It's okay by me if they're given information about reproductive health, as long as they don't misinterpret it.
Many people hope the temporary ban will soon be lifted. If it isn't, it could have far-reaching impacts on mothers like Flor and on those of future generations. Randolph Noble, The Newsmakers in Quezon City.
To talk more about family planning options in the Philippines, I'm joined from Manila by Rita Dairit. She is the president of Pro-Life Philippines, an anti-abortion rights organization. And also from Manila, Carlos Conde. He is a Philippines researcher at Human Rights Watch. Thanks both so much for being with us on the Newsmakers. Rita, let me start with you. Why is a ban on contraception, short-term or longer-term, good for the Philippines?
Oh, first of all, we have to remember that there is a ban because this is against the Constitution. The Constitution of the Philippines states that it will protect the life of the unborn from the moment of conception. Researchers have shown that the contraceptive pills have harmful effects on the child. It actually renders the woman's uterus, the fallopian tubes. Sorry?
Okay, so you believe that the actual contraception itself has an abortive effect?
Yes. Medical books show that. I was just reading a medical encyclopedia this afternoon, and it shows that really contraceptive pills has an abortive effect.
Okay, Carlos, does your research in the Philippines show that that is the case?
Well, well, not entirely. The ban by the TRO, the temporary restraining order issued by the Supreme Court, was very, very specific about these 2 brands of implants, and that, in fact, the crucial part of the arguments now is that the Food and Drug Administration has been remiss in its duty to conduct public hearings about these contraceptives. That's why there's this ban, and the ban is not explicitly does not explicitly say that the Supreme Court ordered the TRO because of what Ms. Dairit said about the Constitution banning contraceptives per se. Now, what this ban in fact does to to millions of Filipino women can be quite profound in their impacts, and we're talking here about millions, 6 million women, Filipino women in the Philippines, for instance, do not have access to contraceptives or reproductive health services. These are the so-called unmet needs of these 6 million Filipino women. So this ban really has some profound impact on Filipinas.
Okay, Rita, I can see you disagree. I'll let you respond quickly there.
Yes, this will have a profound impact if the government do not give enough attention to the medical care of the mothers and the children. What we want government to do is, instead of giving contraceptives to women that is potentially harmful to both the mother and the unborn child, we want our government to provide jobs, to provide industries for the poor. We want the government to provide good educational system for the poor children, because we believe that if these children who are born These are our future taxpayers. These are our future engineers. Population is good if they are educated and well-fed. And we want government to address that.
Okay.
Nutrition needs, educational needs,
That's understandable,
needs.
Rita, but help me better understand your argument here, because you say the Constitution protects life from the moment of conception. But contraceptives, you may argue some different case with the two that are part of this ban. Are you saying all contraception has an abortive effect and should be banned universally across the Philippines?
Almost all contraceptives, I am not a doctor, I am not very sure about this. That is why we are asking for a public hearing. That is why we are asking FDA to show us, to show proof. If a contraceptive pill does not have at all an abortive effect, then it's a go.
Okay.
There are other methods available in the market. There are condoms, tubal ligation is available.
Tubal ligation, you mean sterilization?
Sterilization is available. I do not recommend it because of my faith, but it is available.
Okay, Carlos, I mean, are these realistic options for especially poor women in the Philippines?
Well, that's just the thing, Andrea. I mean, no one is disputing that the Philippines is facing a lot of poverty. A lot of these Filipino families live below the poverty line. No one is disputing that the government needs to address the economic needs and livelihoods of Filipinos in general, and particularly mothers and women. But the fact is that while this ban is in effect, the maternal mortality rate in the Philippines is going up. I mean, we now have, according to World Bank data, 114 deaths per 100,000 live births. And that number is sure to increase as long as this ban is in force. Now, at the same time, the Philippines has one of the highest teen pregnancy rates in Asia, perhaps the highest in Asia. And one of 10 women actually in the Philippines have their first pregnancy at the ages of between the ages of 15 and 19. So there are real practical considerations that need to be addressed by the government and by civil society to meet the needs of these women. And this TRO, this ban on contraceptives, is just prolonging the suffering of these Filipino women. I mean, and also to point out, Andrea, that in the Philippines, it's not just about the contraceptives that are at issue here. Ever since the reproductive health law was passed in 2012, it has been met with a lot of opposition by the conservatives, led by the Catholic Church. And in fact, there have been instances when city mayors in some parts of the countries have issued ordinances that totally ban contraceptives, condoms, pills, implants, and all that, essentially making contraceptives illegal and contrabands, like illegal drugs in some parts of the country, and that's just unconscionable from a human rights perspective.
Okay, Rita, many have made the argument that your organizations make family planning in the Philippines a privilege for the wealthy only. Ironically, for the people that can most afford more children, while the poor are left no options for family planning, and this ban on contraception, on some contraceptive devices, proves that it works against the poor.
I do not know where you get the report that contraception is available only for the rich. Is it because of the TRO that it is not available for the poor? But our organization, we promote the natural family planning, and we have missionaries who go to the poor areas. We teach them the correct values. Mr. Carlos mentioned about our country being Catholic, the Catholics, the Christians, opposing the reproductive health bill. Yes, because to oppose something because of your faith is not entirely wrong. In fact, in many countries, in some countries, like they ban certain foods because of their faith. So the Philippines, being predominantly Catholic, it is just natural for us to promote something that is against our faith. Now, we do understand that this is difficult to impose on people, our faith. And so we go to the Constitution. The Constitution states the right of the unborn the unborn, meaning from the moment of conception. And studies have shown that contraceptive pills have abortive effects, though that is actually killing the unborn. Now, they are saying that as long as the TRO is not lifted and that there is this impact, this negative impact, well then, we challenge the government, we challenge the FDA to go on with our public hearings to show us that this is not against the constitutional rights of the unborn, and then it's a go.
Okay.
We are waiting for them.
Carlos, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the ban actually just affects these two brands of implants, but the campaign by the conservatives and the Catholic Church is across the board in terms of the wide range of options for contraceptives in the Philippines. We're talking about the pill, we're talking about the condoms. I mean, we haven't even mentioned here the fact that the Philippines right now has this really the highest HIV epidemic, increase in HIV infections in Asia. And part of the reason for that is this lack of promotion of condoms. And this is affected by the by the opposition by the Catholic Church and by the conservatives to not just contraceptives, but also condoms. Now, having said that, it is very important to point out that while the Constitution, as Ms. Derrett says, protects the right of the unborn, the Constitution is also very clear that the right of the Filipino woman, the right of the woman should be protected. Now, the bottom line here, Andrea, is that this is about the fundamental right of the Filipino woman to use contraceptive and decide on his reproductive health. And this is also about the duty of government to make sure that that Filipino woman is able to exercise that right without fear or intimidation.
And Carlos, do you find it confusing or even unfair that some pro-life groups tend to be conflating two issues, the issue of abortion and the issue of the right to contraceptives, by equating contraception with abortive properties? They are two very different things.
They certainly are two different things. Now, and let me just point out, the report that you aired before this segment about your reporter going to Manila and standing in front of the Quiapo Church in Manila, where a lot of this abortion medication and bitter herbs are being sold. I mean, that just goes to show to you. Now, the Philippines, while we are a Catholic country officially, Roman Catholicism is nominal in the Philippines. That means a lot of Catholic Christian Filipino women take contraceptives and also undergo abortion, illegal abortion, clandestine abortion, really dangerous types of abortion, precisely because they are not being given the reproductive health services that they so need because of the opposition by many elements. I mean, it strikes me it's not just ironic that the abortion in the Philippines is being facilitated right outside of this iconic Catholic Church in Manila, and it tells you that the problem is really severe in terms of how conflicted Filipino women can be in deciding their reproductive health.
Okay, go ahead, Rita. I could see you had something to say.
I understand your frustration, sir, about things happening outside the Catholic Church. We are frustrated, but the Catholic Church has to do his job of teaching its faithful about the correct values. Now, what other women do, what the Catholics do, we do not really have total control of that. But that will not stop the Church from doing its job of promoting the correct values. And right, you said that there are only two products that is being TRO'd in the market. So therefore, yes, there are other family planning products available. They're like the condoms. They are available, and the Catholic Church cannot do anything about that because we recognize that people have different mindsets, have different values. Regarding the rise of HIV/AIDS, I must say that that is not really correct, because in Thailand, where there is 100% use of condom, there is still HIV/AIDS. So it's not really about AIDS. It's not really about the use of condom. We know that there is a different reason for that.
No, I should correct you there, Ms. Derrett. The United Nations UNAIDS has said that the Philippines has the highest HIV epidemic infection rate in the Philippines. Thailand has lowered their HIV infection rate over the years because of condoms. And Thailand now is the first country in Asia to actually eliminate the transmission of HIV from mother to child because of all this research and the improvements in their intervention in HIV prevention. Now, if the Philippines follows what Thailand did in terms of, taking away stigma, promoting condoms, especially among young Filipino population, then that would really have a lot of impact in terms of reducing HIV in the Philippines. But again, this is probably a little too beside the point about this discussion. But the point I'm trying to make is that, again, the government has the duty, and we're happy that, for instance, the administration of President Duterte has issued this executive order promoting the reproductive health. The government, because the government has a duty to really promote the rights of women to use reproductive health services, and
okay.
I'm sure the Catholic Church has its reasons, but we're talking about lives of millions of women here whose reproductive health needs are not being met.
Okay. Carlos Conde, I will have to give you the last word. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank you both so much, Rita Darit, Carlos Conde, for joining us on the Newsmakers.
A Russian ban on Turkish tomatoes is causing fresh tension between the two nations. But this isn't your standard tomato fight. Ankara is warning Moscow it will retaliate in kind if the ban isn't lifted soon. Russia says the ban is staying in place for now. How, you wonder, did a fruit find itself at the center of a political war of words? Well, the ban on Turkish tomatoes was part of broader sanctions put in place by Russia in November 2015, after the downing of a Russian warplane that Turkey says entered its airspace. Russia still says that didn't happen. In response, Turkey imposed its own sanctions against Russia, costing both countries gravely. But while most sanctions have been lifted, the tomato is a major holdout. One of the reasons may be that the ban is bearing fruit for Russia. In 2015, Russia imported nearly $260 million worth of Turkish tomatoes, making it Turkey's single biggest buyer. That number plummeted to under $90,000 in 2016. Russian growers have been rushing to fill the gap, even announcing new greenhouse projects that can grow tomatoes in Russia year-round. Tomatoes account for more than 60% of Turkish vegetable exports, and some fear this tomato fight could spill over to other areas of Turkish-Russian relations, reversing progress made since the 2015 crisis and imperiling cooperation on issues ranging from security to energy. For now, the dispute is focused on fruit, but you can say this tomato situation is definitely ripe for concern.
Citizens are increasingly critical of the nuisance that excessive mass tourism can generate, and we share that criticism in the government. We are working to achieve sustainability and balance.
Well, perhaps you've heard that Parisians are rude or Venetians are aloof, but if you had to contend with millions of tourists every year in your neighborhood, how friendly would you be? Well, for those who'd already lost patience with the masses of foreign visitors, this summer marks their step over the edge. A wave of anti-tourism protests has hit several of Europe's most popular tourist destinations. Marches have been held in Venice and Athens, while the tires of tourist buses in Barcelona have been slashed. The tourist industry is a huge cash cow, but locals don't see much of that revenue going toward infrastructure and services. Instead, they say most of the money is funneled into private companies or to the federal government. Well, joining me now from Madrid is Taleb Rifai. He is the Secretary General of the World Tourism Organization. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, tell us if you think these protests are legitimate. Do they have cause for their complaints?
Well, let me start by where you ended. You said that something is wrong about the way the tourism is distributing its benefit to the people. And I believe this is the core of the problem. The tourists are supposed to be the most friendly and the most sympathetic and the most contributor to the growth and the economy of the community. They're not doing it that way. So whether they're legitimate or not is not my point here. My point is that we are denying, because of our lack of management, the great benefits that tourism can bring to the community. It's a matter of management, and this management has to be done by the central government of each and every city. When you see so many tourists coming, occupying the city, without having the city benefit from it, this is where you get some of the resentment.
Okay.
Growth is not the enemy, and numbers are not the enemy. It's how you grow.
Okay, then if you can, walk us through the issues that result from poorly managed tourism.
For example, most of the cities that you're talking about have cruise ships coming to their ports on a regular basis. These cruises dump thousands of people at one time, at one point, into one place. These people need to be managed in a much better way. The arrangement and the agreement with the cruises has to be done in a different way. Instead of negotiating how much more they should pay to the city, they should negotiate how much more they should stay in the city, extend their length of stay, distribute their crowds, don't let them stay in the city center, create attractions at the peripheries of the city. In cities like Barcelona or Venice, for example. In Barcelona, if you just go half a kilometer, 400, 500 meters away from the city center, you will be having people that say, where are the tourists? On the other hand, people in the city center are complaining from too much tourists. We should create incentives to attract people to go outside of the city center and of the concentration areas. These are some of the tips that you could do. In negotiating, of course, with the cruisers as well. Cruise ships should be able to provide vouchers to distribute their visitors into different parts of the city. Everybody will be a winner in that case. The cruises will get their percentage out of selling these vouchers. The service providers will get their share of benefits. And the visitors will also experience a different, diverse experience all around the city.
Okay,
we have developed some very good manuals for that, but unfortunately, some of the city administrators are not listening to us, and they're following much of the popular uprising and the popular trends like any populist government is doing around the world.
But what about the commercial interests involved? I mean, it's very difficult for cruise tour operators in particular to tweak their schedules. I mean, the reason people go on cruises is because they want to see 10 cities in 10 days, and that gives them only a few hours' time to be dropped off. If they have to change that, they will have to look at reduced profits. Are you ready to take that on with corporate interests?
Definitely, they should be able to. What they are doing is they're reducing their profits by paying cities more for their landing fees. This is what the negotiating is all about between cities and cruisers. How much taxes do they pay per tourist when they land? This should not be the criteria. Cruises can make more money, satisfy the people more with a more diverse and more real experience. This year, my dear, is the year of International Year for Sustainable Tourism for Development, as declared by the United Nations General Assembly. The motto of this year is travel, enjoy, respect.
Okay.
It's the respect part that we're missing here.
But I mean, let's look at the protesters themselves. Do you think they've been respectful? Because in some senses, it almost looks like, I don't want to say xenophobia, perhaps that's too strong of a term, but they really look like they're anti-foreign visitors. They don't want them there. Do you worry about where they're coming from and how drastic their movement
Definitely.
is? Go ahead.
Definitely. If you look at the motives and the igniters behind this, you would get your answers. I don't want to point any fingers of accusation, because usually we are accustomed to say, and we are in principle say, that people cannot be wrong. But in this case, there are agitators. The city administrators are not also innocent from these issues. So I don't say I sympathize, but I don't say I cannot sympathize also with these protesters. Some of these protesters are genuine, but others are really just looking for a moment of fame and a moment to claim some glory. The very same people that are now protesting against tourists are going to be the first to cry, where are the tourists when they go away? This is a very serious game. that they're playing. Because at the end of the day, people will stop going to places where they don't feel welcome. You never go to a place that you don't feel welcome.
Indeed.
And if that happens, the loss is going to be great. 1 out of 10 jobs all over the world are created by travel and tourism.
Okay.
$3.2 billion are spent every day in travel and tourism. We're going to lose much of that, and these people are going to be regretting what they're doing today.
They need to be careful what they wish for. Okay, Talib Rifai, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on the Newsmakers.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Walking through a party in the county jail. The prison band was there, they began to wail. The band was jumping and the joint began to swing. You should have heard the knocked out jailbird sing, let it rock. Everybody let it rock. Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Spider-Man played it in a saxophone. Little Joe was blowing on the slide trombone. The drummer broke the melody over crash, boom, bang. The whole rhythm section was a purple gang. Let it rock. Everybody let it rock.
I feel he's here. It's like really a strange thing. I just feel he's here.
Number 47 said to number 3, you the cutest jailbird I ever did see. I sure would be delighted with your company. Come on and do the jailhouse rock with me. Let it rock. Everybody let it rock. Lay it on me, Daddy-O. Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Rock to the jailhouse rock. Sad sack was sitting on a block of stone, way over in the corner weeping all alone. The warden said, hey buddy, don't you be no square. If you can't find a partner, use a wooden chair.
That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Andrea Sankey. Next time, Nigerians are telling their president either come back and run the country or resign. We'll tell you why. Until then, thanks for watching. Goodbye.